right, so I have Ken Buckman here. Ken, this is the only way I was able to get a conversation with you uninterrupted. I had to build this entire studio to get a conversation.
You put me on a captive training. Forced me out of the city, out into the burbs.
The only way to get you to focus for a couple hours is to build a podcast studio and start interviewing you.
Can you focus, though?
That's why I have Pat.
That's going to keep both of us.
Yeah. So Ken has a unique story that I know some of it, and I want other people to know what an entrepreneur is. You're somebody that going through my entrepreneurial time, growing. You're someone that I've heard a ton of stories about, looked up to, had some effect. Your stories had some effect on my business and my life. So I thought it'd be great to have you come on and share some of those stories and kind of let you know those stories have impacted people, even though you don't know it.
So you're trying to say I'm old?
A little bit. So one of the first things I think that you and I do very well is networking. I met you through so many different people, through Ed French, through Tim Green, anybody at John Green, Shane Haleman. So I think something that resonates with both of us in entrepreneurs is networking. At what point in your life did you realize networking was important?
When every time you seem to turn around, whoever you meet knows somebody who knows somebody who knew you. So you quickly learn never to piss off anybody, and that networking is the only way that you end up. And it's so strange, no matter where you go and what you do. It seems like whatever you're trying to do at that moment, you end up meeting somebody or remembering somebody that you had met that relates to it, and you call them up, and next thing you know it, they're patching you into the actual person that had the building that you want, or the product that you want, or the employees that you needed, or the law firm. It gets, the older you get, the scarier it gets, frankly, and from where I sit, of how everything is interlinked, and it makes no sense often how the interlinks are. That you don't realize them while you're making them, you realize them when you need them.
Yeah.
Right.
I've
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I experienced that a lot lately. Had breakfast with a guy recently, and he has some pool and some friends that could help out. I got an odd call one day, says, "Hey Jeff, I need some help with this," and I randomly just had gotten breakfast with this guy 2 days before, and called him up, said, "Hey, I'm sorry, but I need a favor." He's like, "What's up? What can I help you with?" I haven't had breakfast with him in probably 2 years. I randomly had breakfast with him. 2 days later, I needed his help. Yeah. So it's just the energy, the way the world works.
You don't know. So you just keep going.
Yeah.
Every day, every chance you get.
So you're an entrepreneur. When did entrepreneurship start for you? Like at what age? Because mine started pretty young. I was 8 cutting grass, making money.
So you're asking a much bigger question without realizing it. So I'll try not to go off in too many tangents. And Pat, you keep me in.
I'll rein you in, man.
Rein me in, Pat. First off, I think the word entrepreneurship is way overused.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But conversely, when I went to college, I'm 55, so 92 graduate, University of Iowa, Pat.
Hawkeyes.
Yeah, go Hawkeyes. There was no such thing as an entrepreneurship track at college. In fact, if you weren't finance, accounting, management, or marketing, which is what I was, and you said you wanted to be an entrepreneur, people looked at you like, so you can't get a job? I mean, it was almost a negative word. Now fast forward to now, I think the word is way overused and misunderstood. And so every time I get the opportunity to I love talking to undergrads. I'm a regular at Northwestern in an entrepreneurship class once a quarter. And I always tell them, entrepreneurship is really at its core so that you don't overblow what it is. You're not risking everything and selling all your clothes for entrepreneurship at its core is doing life, just doing life. Go to school, go to work, go out on dates, go on the family vacation, hang out with your friends with one simple, teeny tiny little change. And once you ingrain this in your mind, you literally can go through life as a true entrepreneur. There's other stuff in the back end, but the core basic is at the end of every day, and just in general, human beings bitch. They complain about everything, right? But when they complain about something, what they're really doing is identifying something that doesn't make sense. Like, I don't understand why I have to wait in this long line. They should have an app for this. Or I don't understand why they haven't fixed that sidewalk that makes me walk an extra 50 feet. Fill in the blanks across the board every single day. You do it, I do it. But most people just bitch and move on. Entrepreneurs take note every single time that they bitch. And the bitch, by the way, it doesn't have to be about something as obvious as, why do I have to wait in this long line? I hate waiting for things. It could be something tragic. Like, how could that be allowed to happen? You know, why hasn't somebody done something about that? And so an entrepreneur doesn't just say that and move on. An entrepreneur tucks it in the back of their mind, or writes a little note on their iPhone and looks at it at 3 a.m. when they're inevitably up because they have ADHD like me. And they ask a couple simple questions. You know, they take a look at each thing and they say, that does bother me. That's tragic. I wonder if it bothers others, or is it just me? You know, is this a one-off? Am I just really hard to live with? Or is this something that's universal? And then, so then if you actually want to find out, you ask a couple people, hey, did that bother you too? Did you like that line also? If you find out from a bunch of friends that, hey, that bothered them too, then it's, do I have any ideas of how to fix that? Did something come to mind? And if there's something there, and it's like, I wonder if somebody would pay for that. And you start asking a couple questions. It's as simple as that. And by the way, 999 of these things are so dumb or so unfulfilled that they go away just as fast as a non-entrepreneur, but it's the one.
Right.
And you never know. So you look at a guy like Jeff. I know Jeff well enough that nobody can define you right now. You're just, they have to use the word serial entrepreneur because there's no definition of why, you know, you have a gym and you had a cannabis business for, you know, and then you have a yard company, you have land moving. Nothing correlates, but what does correlate, I'll bet you. I didn't ask you this question ahead of time, so we didn't rehearse this, right? Can you guys verify we didn't rehearse? So I'll bet you though, each of your businesses at some point had you stopping and saying, that does not make sense. I see an opportunity. I bet you some other people see that opportunity, and I confirm that, and they will pay for it. Now I ought to pursue it, right? And all of a sudden, that's how you go from one business to the next, and that's why you can't be defined, but you can be defined on the process you went to get there.
Well, it's to me, it's the hardest part. In what you're saying, it sounds like it's being a problem solver, right?
I mean, ultimately, yes.
Yeah, and the hardest part, I think, that differentiates between a true entrepreneur and the person that just bitches is execution, right? And I think that's the tough part, because I think everybody has great ideas, but it's like executing on those great ideas is what really separates the entrepreneurs or the successful ones versus the ones who don't get into it.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. But if you line up, 100 top entrepreneurs and look and hear their stories, put each one of them in this podcast seat, I'll bet you every one of them started with something that happened. When you watch Shark Tank, right? I mean, every one of them, quite often they're tear-filled stories because there was something that, somebody died in their family, or somebody got terribly sick, or something happened that shouldn't have happened at workers, and they came up with an idea as a result. But it was from them identifying something that didn't make sense, that somebody didn't solve, and getting passionate about that. It's not sitting up on a whiteboard like you got back there and saying, hey guys, let's strategize until we come up with something that's never been invented before, that everybody desperately one of the facts I tell the classes when I talk to them is most people don't understand that 99.99% of everything that ever could be invented, whether it's technology, whether it's service, whether it's a product, it's already been invented, all right? It's already been invented. What true entrepreneurs do, who capitalize on it, they first start with something that doesn't make sense. Then they find out that there is a potential idea for a solution. They start looking at stuff that's already available out there. And then they repackage, repurpose, and combine multiple things that are out there, and all of a sudden come up with a whole new category or product and blow it out to everyone and become ridiculously successful. And you can reinvent just about anything out there with the right idea of something that doesn't make sense. Look at Yeti coolers. They can, I mean, last time I checked, we all had coolers when we were a kid. We didn't, and we paid, $12 for them, not $8,000 or whatever they go for.
Right.
What about these stupid thermoses that everyone's got that cost $45, $50?
Right.
I used to have a 99-cent one from the, anyway, you can go on and on.
How many
and on.
late night texts have I sent you? What do you think about this idea? What do you think about it? And you're like, that is awful. That is awful. That is awful. All right, you try that one. That one.
Yeah.
But then I'll bet you all of a sudden you go, holy shit, that one we should talk about a little bit more.
This was a 10 p.m. text to Pat about the podcast.
For sure. And I mean, I can remember the last, one specifically that I messaged you about, but I think that just goes back to, it's like, hey, we've got these good ideas, but how do we make them a reality, right? I think, like you nailed it, right? Where it's like, okay, it's solving like a problem, right? But okay, is this a problem just that I'm having, or do you think this is a scalable problem that everybody's having? And then when you
sounds much better when you say it that way.
Yeah, scalable.
We're saying the same thing. Yeah.
So you going into problems, you solved the problem at a young age, and I love this story. And I want you to tell this story about the bike story. So
all right.
This was
but I'll have to shorten it because I can go on with that. But let me say one other myth about entrepreneurship, which I think is important for us to bring up. A lot of people incorrectly assume all entrepreneurs are rich. That we go home every night and jump into a king size bed full of cash and throw it all over the room. The average entrepreneur makes $50,000 a year. If you put everyone in a bag together. So in that light, if you're doing this for money, get a job, because entrepreneurship is not
it's for the love of it.
And I always tell the kids that have stars in their eyes, they all want to be Bezos and Facebook and fill in the blanks. You want to be one of those guys. Go to Home Depot, buy a 12-foot steel pole, go stand out in the parking lot and wait for lightning to hit. And when lightning hits that pole, I want you to also play the lottery and win, both simultaneously. You do all that, you're one of those guys. Otherwise, you're in the $50,000 average. Once in a while, people break out, so on and so forth. But you have to understand that this is it's never been about a cash game.
Right.
So I just wanted to say that as one of the myths.
As you touch base on that, let's talk about the difference between business owners and entrepreneurs. And I think there's a misconception that a lot of people kind of mix those two together.
Yeah.
Give us your stance and your opinion on the difference between a business owner and an entrepreneur.
So an entrepreneur expects to be hit in the face with a sledgehammer over and over and over and over, and keep getting up and believing in their idea, product, or service so vehemently, because everyone around you is going to tell you you're dumb. It's a bad idea. How could you risk everything? How could you put your family in jeopardy? I mean, you've heard them all, right? But they have to be the ultimate cheerleader, the ultimate, the fancy word is grit nowadays, that you got to have so much, it keeps changing every 5 or 6 years, but it all means the same thing: passion, grit, perseverance. You are going to be the only one that gets your product to the other line and the other side at the end of the day. And that plays out in anything, big or small. There's another one here in Chicago based that'd be really cool. Maybe you can get this guy on. I don't know him, but I love following him. The Dude Wipes guy.
Oh yeah.
He built that business. Everyone's like, are you fucking kidding me? Right. You want people to have wet wipes for their ass? And ultimately, he's got what now, a $300 million company. I was at NASCAR in Chicago a couple weeks ago. He had his own car. It's like to get to the other side, you gotta be that guy. A business owner, you can buy a business, but you're not the ultimate passionate one. So the problem with just being a business owner, and don't confuse me with being an entrepreneur that starts doing acquisitions, because that's ultimately how we rocketed at the end,
right,
and sold out to private equity. But a business owner, when he gets hit in the face with the sledgehammer over and over, eventually he's not going to get up too early. And that's why they go bankrupt a lot.
Yeah. Right.
If you're the entrepreneur first and the idea was there, that didn't make sense originally, remember guys? Yeah. Then you start being the business owner on the other end, but you always were the entrepreneur first.
Right. So it sounds like it's a mentality. That really is the difference.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is.
So you were talking about going back to solving problems. Tell us about it.
I mean, back to the beginning.
Yeah.
You want to, and again, I really hope there's no other walkaways from this. It's just walking away, understanding you can change your mindset just a teeny bit. And everyone, you can be an entrepreneur in your home, and family vacations. You can be working for somebody. You don't have to be working for yourself. You could be you'll be, if you do that simple little mindset change in a corporate job, you'll be the best employee in your whole setup in no time.
What's that mindset change?
Again, something doesn't make sense. Just
find a solution.
I wonder if other people in this office think that doesn't make sense. I wonder, do I have a solution for that? I wonder if somebody would pay for that. Well, the company will get the credit for that, but I'll bring the idea. I'll form the team. You can still be an entrepreneur again without risking everything. Everyone miscalculates that you have to throw everything into the wind. No, screw that. It's just a mindset. And when you start doing that, life gets better in general because you're not waiting around for everybody else to do something for you. You're the leader. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. You'll figure out little odds and ends that make your life and those around your's lives a lot better. And then people want to be with you.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I don't think it's something too where it needs to be like this all in, quit my job right now and just go do it. I think it's something that can happen gradually, or it can happen quit my job right now and go all in too, right? So I think, back to the point that you made when you were in college, like there was like this, maybe the stigma around saying you were an entrepreneur that wasn't good. I still think that that's a bit the same nowadays, where I don't think anybody's really taught to be an entrepreneur. We're taught to have a job and work for essentially somebody else, right? So I think for those people or young individuals that are trying to go the traditional path of like getting a job, not to shy away from these ideas where like, hey, I have a solution to a problem. I can still work on that while getting a degree or doing something. And then as it starts to materialize into something, then it can be transitioned back into it like a full-time deal.
Not only are you dead on right, everyone now has a huge advantage that we haven't had until now. We have it now too. AI is literally will do this for you. You ask it the questions, it spits out. Yeah. You just give its core data of what doesn't make sense, and you start getting...
Oh, it's crazy.
I mean, it's a whole... You don't even need to ask your friends anymore. No. You can ask your fake friends, your AI friends. Right. No, I'm taking a course at Northwestern right now I don't know anything about AI, but I know it's sweeping the world in every way, shape, or form. And I know it's going to make entrepreneurs' lives and abilities skyrocket. It already is.
Yeah, it's helped us.
So anybody can be right now and should be, and it takes much less time. So do the normal track at the same time. Do them both.
Right. Yeah, I don't think there's one course, like one route to becoming an entrepreneur. I think everybody's kind of got unique and different circumstances and stories, and it's interesting to see where people ultimately started and how they got to where they got to, which I think is a really great segue to like kind of hear about where you started and
It's my favorite story. I've heard it 100 times, and I love hearing it. So keep telling it.
I feel like I've told the story too much, but it does go right back to, without knowing that I was doing it at the time, recognizing something didn't make sense. So I used to work at Naperville Schwinn. Remember Schwinn bikes?
I had that was my first bike growing up.
68-pound Schwinn Varsity, yes. Schwinn bikes owned the world back then. And I was 15. Like you, Jeff, I had a lawn mowing business. I'm thinking yours was bigger than mine. I only had about 25 lawns. How many did you have?
I think me and Pat had about 3,000 acres.
Yeah. Way to one up me, Jeff. That's great. And you were what, 4?
I was 20.
Yeah, you're a little older than 15.
I was 23 or 24 at the time.
Yeah.
I used to $10 a lawn is what I charged back in the early 80s. And then if people wanted me to bill them once a month, then it was $12 a month. And my dad, this is not the story you asked me to tell. My dad would let me use his lawnmower. And it was an old Snapper, self-propelled.
Yeah.
And he charged me $2 a lawn to rent the thing. I'm like, so this is where
on,
the
Dad.
And so I realized,
He's an
mowing
entrepreneur.
25 lawns a week, I'm like, geez, after 4 weeks, Dad, I could have $200, and Ace Hardware down the street has this shiny new Snapper that is like the new drive system.
Right.
How about you give me back the $200 for the last couple of weeks or a couple of months, and I'm going to go buy. He said,
Nope.
Absolutely not. So then I saved it. I went and bought it. I brought it home. He said, that's great, wonderful. Where are you going to put it?
Oh, no.
Oh yeah, he did. Yeah, where are you going to put it? I'm like, what are you talking
Your
about, Dad? He
garage,
said,
Dad.
That's my garage, not your garage. You can rent my garage.
For $2 a week.
Thanks for teaching me, Dad.
Yeah.
No, the bike store though, early on, I was 15, had to get a work permit back then. I don't know, do they even let 15-year-olds still go to work nowadays?
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking learner's permit, but I'm thinking driver's license.
Yeah,
So maybe,
I don't know.
yeah.
So I mean, we
This
just
is
had to
the-
get like a permission slip
Yeah, yeah.
signed. And so I was a bike mechanic, but like a week into it there, all the sales reps didn't show up that day. And it was just the owner, and there was a crowd in. So he said, you're going to have to go out on the floor. And long story short, I sold 2 Schwinn varsities and 2 kids bikes out to the whole family, and it was an unbelievable high. I mean, I thought I was going to be a doctor. I was going to be a doctor like my father. He's a cancer specialist, and I've never done cocaine, but I'm pretty sure that the high that I felt when I sold this and it had to be what it's like. But here's what bothered me is, so we go up to the cash register. And this is a big sale too. The bikes were $300 each, and so it was over $1,000. And this is back in 1985.
That's a big sale.
And it's bright and sunny out, by the way. And this family's there, and they're all excited about their bikes. And I had to turn it over to the owner because I didn't know how to work a cash machine or the cash register. And they ran it up, and it fills out the receipt and says, "Come back to pick up your bikes in 2 weeks." And I look at him and I said, "What do you mean? 2 weeks? It's beautiful out. They're here to buy a bike. They want to ride their bikes."
Right.
I said, "No, that's not the way it works." I said, "What do you mean that's not the way it works?" This is after the guy left. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And they picked out like maybe the floor models or something.
I said, "What do you mean?"
Yeah.
He said, "Well, we build the bikes as they buy them, not before. So we got to wait for them to be bought, and then we'll put them in the schedule." And me being one of the mechanics, I would put them together, and then they come back and pick them up 2 weeks later. I said, "That makes no sense."
Right.
Do you see? That makes no sense. It's beautiful. That's why they walked into your store to begin with. Mm-hmm. Why can't they ride home with it? So then I found out that all the bikes were actually in the building. He buys them ahead of time. They all do, and it was up in a storage room. And so I said, so all the bikes are here. They're in boxes that he could have, if the bikes were built, he could have taken it. Yeah. So I said, if I can get my parents to let me work, can I come in right after school on Friday, work all night Friday into Saturday until I start getting too tired, then I'll go home and I'll take a nap, then I'll come back Saturday late afternoon, stay all night Saturday. He had to get home and go to church with the parents on Sunday morning. Then I could come back and work the rest of the day, Sunday till like 4 o'clock. Then I had to do my homework and go back to school for the week. But I said, all I want to do, I said, you don't have to pay me anymore. And by the way, what do you think minimum wage was back then?
I heard the story, but it was around $2. Was it?
No, it wasn't that bad, but $3.35.
Okay, I'll
$3.35.
Wow.
So I said, you don't have to pay me any more for 9 hours. I said, but just let me do one thing and one thing only. Let me build all those bikes. And so I did, long story short. And sure enough, and I said, and let me put them all out on the floor so that no matter what bike somebody picks, we'll have the different colors upstairs or on the floor and the different sizes. Mm-hmm. And then I said, can I go change your sign out front? Everyone had a sign out, up front of big sale today only. But this one, I changed it to, and I didn't realize I was being clever, but it was kind of clever. Buy your bike today, ride your bike today, because it made no sense to me that you had to wait 2 weeks.
Right.
So it worked. and people started coming in with it, and it absolutely did what it was supposed to. So then I quickly learned from just talking to the owner a little bit more that he didn't really make any money on the bikes. It was like, he said 22% margin. I didn't know what margin is, but he explained, you know, so I pay this and we sell it for that. I said, wow, that's, you know, not that much, you know, and you got to pay me and pay everyone else out of it. That's not that much. And then he says, yeah, but the accessories, once you buy a bike, like helmets, locks,
seat
cushions. Remember those little buggies, the original Burley buggies? Now they're everywhere, but the buggies you take your kid behind, or now everyone takes their dogs around.
Oh yeah.
Those are $300-400, I think, at the time. Those, he taught me, were between 200% and 400% markup or margin. And I'm like, wow, that's a ton of money. He said, but then I look around the store, and the store, all that stuff is on the walls, like away from the people. And I said, you know, should we maybe have some of that stuff in the middle of the bike so that they want it? Oh, no, they'll figure it out. This is how I've always done it. That's another thing that
we've always done it this way. That's my favorite.
That's a t-shirt. Quote. We've always done it this way. That's why we're bankrupt. You know? So I asked him, and not by this time I was 16, because I think we're 3-4 months into this at this point. I said, would you let me set up a couple of displays in the middle of the bikes? And he said, well, what are you thinking? I said, well, and I didn't know I was going to be a trade show guy in the future with displays at this time. I should have known that. I'd sealed my fate. I said, you know, helmets and locks. Remember the Kryptonite U-bars?
Yeah.
This is when they first came out back then. That was red hot. And those things were $30.
Yeah.
$30 in 1985.
With
it's got to be like $100 now, right? I mean,
right.
It's insane. So I said, can I make 2 displays? And one for locks and one for helmets. And he said, sure, no problem. I said, okay. And if I sell a bike first, and when I had these things out there, since you told me basically you make no money on the bike, but you make a ton of money on the other stuff, how about if I sell a bike first, I have to sell the bike, anything that I sell from the accessories on top of it, you know, you give me a little bit of it. And I didn't know the word commission. He said, well, what are you thinking? And I said, I don't know, 10%? He said, yeah, I can do that. So the helmets were like $30 and the locks were $30. So I'm realizing I'm making $3.35 an hour. You know, I could have a $3 bonus here, a $3 bonus there.
Yeah.
I went to the library and got a librarian, because we didn't have the internet then. And my Google search was the librarian. And I said, hey, I need an article, because back then they would search on this thing called microfiche, which essentially had all the newspaper articles on these ribbons, and the librarians were experts in how to find the right ribbons and guide you to the right thing. I said, I need an article on, you know, death or dismemberment on a bike for people not wearing helmets. And I need something on bikes getting stolen close to their homes because they don't have locks. And 10 minutes later,
statistical data on it.
10 minutes later, she's got these 2 articles, and one was like traumatic brain injury, high percentages within a quarter mile of your house. And then on the theft side, it was, you know, most bikes are stolen at the community pool, you know, which is always right up the street. So I had those 2, and I paid the extra 10 cents to laminate them, and I put them at the top of these displays. And we started, and by the way, I got the owner to do it with the other sales reps too. And I went and explained to them, so sell a bike first, but then sell this stuff. And so it didn't take long for myself and others, but me more so, to sell one bike, which was the norm coming in, and get them to buy a helmet or a lock. But then, you know, quickly start talking about the rest of their family based on the articles about death and dismemberment and everyone's bikes getting stolen. I'm like, well, what kind of a parent are you if you wouldn't put helmets on your kids and if you didn't want? And next thing you know it, you would have an average $300-400 bike with an average of $300 to $400 of accessories.
Right.
And in case you forgot the math, $30 to $40 to me. So fast forward, it worked, by the way, and it worked fantastic. And like, my fake cocaine habit skyrocketed, because every one of these things, I would get this high after every single one of these sales. Like, I love this. It's awesome. He came to me about 6 months later, and said, we got to stop the program. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you can't, I'm not going to pay you for the accessories anymore. And I said, well, why not? He said, you're making too much money. And I was making, $300-400 a week, easily extra on top.
Right.
But he said, we got to stop the program. And I said, last time I checked,
you're making more money too.
If I'm making too much money, you're making way too much money. Because didn't you get 90% and I got 10%? Wasn't that our deal? And he said, no, we're going to stop it. Well, in the meantime, Schwinn had a competitor across town in Naperville open up called McGinty Schwinn. You might have remembered this growing up from here. And so I called Bill McGinty that night. There was no such thing as non-competes that we have now.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know what a non-compete was. I called Bill. I said, hey, Bill, I'm the guy. And he said, you're the guy what? I said, I'm the guy, buy your bike today, ride your bike today. Because it turns out after I did that, everyone, including the department stores, started building all their, because they all used to be 2-week delivery. They all started building their bikes instant delivery. So it turned out that solved a problem that everyone legit, So I said, hey, Bill, I'm that guy. And he said, wow, that's great. I said, yeah, I want to come work for you. Because Dave at Naperville Schwinn canceled my program. He said, well, what program? And I explained it all to him. And he said, well, how much was he paying you? I said, 15%. He said, done, you're hired. And I said, great, wonderful. I'll start, in a couple days. And I went in the next day to Naperville Schwinn. And I said, hey, Dave, I'm sorry, I got to quit. He said, what do you mean? Where are you going? I said, I'm going to McGinty's. See, what are you going to McGinty's for? This is his enemy now. I said, well, because he's going to do the program that you canceled. He said, fine. I'll start the program. We can keep going with the program. I said, Dave, no, he's going to pay me more. And Dave said, well, how much? I said, 20%. And he gave it to me. So all kinds of lessons were learned from that.
Sure.
Don't mess with your sales force.
Yeah.
When you got something that makes a lot of sense, participate with your employees. This is where phantom stock comes in and equity in different companies. We can go down all these different rabbit holes, but that's the basic story.
I love that story. That story is true entrepreneurship, at its finest. So what was your first company that you had? Fast forwarding a little bit, what was the first company that was yours that you started?
So I thought I was going to be in medical supplies. The cocaine rush was all it. That was back in the day, guys, that all the sales reps selling pharmaceuticals and medical equipment.
Viagra.
Oh my, yes, this is exactly. Yeah, good, Pat. It's like you read my mind. Yeah. This is exactly, and they all had Porsches, huge expense accounts. They could take the doctors to islands and strip clubs, and it was the Wild West back then. Yeah. And right as and jobs were aplenty. You could get a job anywhere, and that's what I was going to do. I was going to graduate Iowa and go do that. Just before I graduated, like 6 months before, was when that opioid crisis blew up full scale.
Yep.
And that's where they quickly, on the government level, regulatory level, realized that the abuse of all the doctors and the expense accounts and the trips, and overnight they shut it down. And overnight, everyone was laid off. The cars were all turned in, and there was no job for me. So it turned out that the manager of the Schwinn bike store before me, this ties into mentors, which I know you love the subject of mentors that we'll hit on at some point, I'm guessing here. Yep. He had married a woman whose uncle was a senior executive in the trade show industry, which ultimately ends up being my first company, because when I had no job out of college, this old boss of mine got me an interview with the company he went to in the trade show industry, 100% commission sales. I made $1,000 a month draw, which, in case you don't know what draw means, that means borrowed. If you can't sell,
recoverable draw.
Yeah, recoverable. That's a personal guarantee in banking terms. I learned all these words without learning these words.
You learned them the hard way.
I shortly helped out a buddy in the trade show industry, so I know how hard a work that is. I mean, that is.
But I loved it. Yeah. But I was embarrassed back in the day.
So wait, for people who maybe don't know what that is,
what is trade show? What are trade shows?
So the easiest way to explain it to a universal audience is everyone's been to an auto show. Mm-hmm. I do everything but the cars when you go there.
Yep.
You build the booths, you set the booths up, you take them down,
the carpet, the pad, the computers, the models, the furniture.
chairs.
Because
city.
Because these aren't permanent structures.
Correct.
Shows. They come up every so often in different cities and in different locations.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct.
You ship them to the next location.
So, ironically, I was embarrassed because all my friends were investment bankers. And that's when open outcry trading was going on downtown. You get the cool jacket and wear that to the bars with the girls. You know, they're like, "What do you do?" I sell booths. You sell boobs? No, I sell booths. Exhibits. So anyway, fast forward. I had identified as becoming a top sales rep in that business, and there's 6-7 years that went by. But I had identified a category that an early mentor that played a big part in my life shortly after in starting the company came up with rental. Nobody was renting exhibits. They were only selling them. And this is now fast forward to just before the dot-com crash, which was in 99 and 2000. There was so much money flowing around out there for all these venture capital companies, for all these kids that would write .com on a napkin, and venture capital would come in and stroke them checks for $10 million left and right, and let them just burn it because they would go public super fast. Everyone would cash out, and they'd move on to the next thing. That's what was going on in 99 and early 2000. But all these guys were buying the trade show booths. So I ultimately launched my company for something that made no sense to me. Here, go back to the theme. I launched my company exclusively to sell to the .com kids, these punks that were getting $10 million checks, and exclusively rentals. And I hired high-end people from the sales side, high-end designers and project managers and et cetera, and just moved them into the rental world. I by no means was the only guy that was renting out there or the first guy, but my mentor was one of the first. Mm-hmm. And that's how we ultimately built our original business.
And that's how they still do it today.
Most of them do.
Yeah.
What I had was in early March of 2000, that's when the dot-com bubble burst big. And I went from a company that was launching to 68 bankruptcies overnight. Everything cratered at once. It was worse than the financial crisis and faster than the financial crisis for those of us that lived through it. But I wasn't exposed at all because of the way that most people were doing deals at that point. There was so much money flowing around that they come to me and say, "Hey, Bucky, how your booth is $10,000. How about instead of $10,000, I give you $1 million?" What are you talking about? So I'll give you stock because we're going to go public and this is going to be worth $1 million. And by the way, all these ideas were so dumb. I'm not, by no means am I that smart, but when you hear these guys explain these early .com companies, there's no chance they were ever going to make a profit. And you knew it. And so I'd say, Jeff, how about you were the guy that came up with that brilliant idea. How about you keep your $1 million? Just give me the $10,000.
Yeah.
Thank goodness, because a lot of people would take the stock. And so when they all went down, companies went down everywhere. But that was my first company. And ultimately, we pivoted super quickly. That rentals were unique, Pat. And the regular market craved them too. So we went after companies that were actually making a profit, like BP Amoco and Motorola, Sara Lee, and we got these big companies really quick, and it just mushroomed from there.
And who was your first mentor in that, or who was?
There were several mentors that led up, but in short, mentor is another word.
That's why I want to bring that up.
Okay,
mentor is another
word.
Me. It's a very big buzzword.
That's overused. Yep, and can be abused. Mm-hmm. True mentors are people that you can align yourself with that truly care about you and you care about them. They're not just some podcast, superstar that you want to tell everyone, oh, this guy or gal is, talking to me. It's somebody who truly has, for whatever reason, concern for your well-being and growth as a human. And that being said, I believe that everybody should have as many mentors as possible. It's not get one and done. It's constantly, just like you're constantly identifying things that don't make sense, you're identifying on your networking when you're meeting, when you meet somebody truly remarkable, don't instantly at the end of your first hour meeting say, you're my new mentor. But with follow-up meetings, you will know, both sides, I think, know when you got the right person to add to your group.
Right.
Yeah. You feel that how they care about you.
Well, it's mutually beneficial.
Yeah, it's mutually beneficial. You and I have quite a few for different reasons. This guy's good at this guy's good at this. But I felt at one point people were taking me under their wing and like, hey, this guy cares about me. And I'm kind of starting to do that with some guys now. They're younger and they're getting into business, and I will see them trying or striving, and I kind of notice myself, hey, I'm gonna watch over you. He didn't come up to me, or these guys didn't come up and say, can you be my mentor?
Right.
And that's what a lot of people say, like, oh, I'm going to ask this guy to be my mentor. It's like, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Right.
Someone ends up caring about you and kind of taking you under their wing and like just watching over you, make sure you don't do anything stupid and pay the idiot tax.
Right.
They say, hey, don't do this, don't do that. And, we've shared a lot of the same mentors, but I don't think it's, hey, can you be my mentor? It's somebody that actually does care about you, your well-being, and wants you to do well and believes in you. Right.
And you literally have a version of love for these people.
Right.
Yes.
So when I was a sales rep, those 6-7 years, and rocketed to the top on 100% commission, the owner of that company recognized that I was very impatient. I had extreme ADHD. And knew I was getting bored fast. So he pulled me into his office early, about year 2, and we determined that I was doing all this busy work that made no sense, that I should be out there selling more. And so he allowed me for the first time to hire somebody as an assistant, which ultimately became project management, which became a junior rep program, and it ended up being 5 people. But each person, the deal that we made so that everyone else didn't say I was getting something special was, I had my quotas. When we added a person, we changed the quotas. They went up together, he and I. And I had to pay for this person out of my commissions in full on day one, and ultimately 5 people in full. But as I hit different targets, he would start to pay a percentage. When I exceeded the targets, it started reversing. I started getting the huge bonuses, and that's ultimately how by age 25, I was earning a ridiculous income. But it wasn't because I was treated special. It was because I had a mentor that early identified that there was something unique in me, and I immediately saw something unique in him that he would allow me to even do something like this.
So this is the trade shows.
This is the trade show. This is before I started my company.
This is before you started it. You were working for this gentleman who at the time he was your mentor.
Yes.
And then
I didn't know what that word was.
Right,
yet,
but he was a guy that you got a lot of advice from and felt like a mutual care for. And then this is how you were how old? 20?
Well, 20. It started at about 22.
22?
To 26. Range.
So then you had like 5 people under you. He built like this accelerator program where once you got to a certain amount, you ended up getting into accelerators.
Once my sales hit certain quotas, then he would pay back their salaries plus. Yeah.
And then at what point did you then walk away and then start your own?
No, not only that. That's a great assumption, Pat. It was the opposite. So I kind of fell in love with this guy that he would allow me to do that. Then he went a step further, and I was getting bored even with that. And so he came to me and said, I see what's happening. You're getting bored again. And this guy was a workaholic, which ultimately was how we ended up not together forever, because I would have stayed with him forever. He called me into his office. He said, all right, Bucky, I work late every day. If you wait till everyone else leaves, come down to my office each day, and I will teach you everything that I did that day. All my decisions I had to make, I'll open my books to you. I'm going to teach you.
Like a succession plan almost?
No, I don't think he was thinking that at all. He truly knew I was curious.
Okay.
And in return, what he got, whether he had wanted it or not, was me being so loyal to him and loving making money for him. I literally would have stayed with that guy as long as he wanted. Ultimately, he ended up selling the business because he worked too much, and his kids thought he was somebody that came over to play for an hour on Sunday, and his wife was about on the edge of probably marital serious issue. He recognized it. He sold the company at the right time. The new guy and I were
Yeah.
I quit. I literally quit the first day in the first interview with this guy. I was the top rep. I was in the top 3 out of over 850 reps globally at this point. And this guy that overpaid for the company in large part because of me was that offensive that I walked away. By the way, I was 2 weeks away from getting married when I walked away. I had to go home and tell my wife, future wife, hey, you're marrying a loser. Sorry, I'm unemployed.
So
wasn't worth it.
Yeah. No, I guess yeah, it's kind of interesting because he kind of confided in you with all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then there wasn't, I was thinking there was you were saying like a succession plan for like.
Nope, that wasn't the discussion at all. He thought that there would come a day that he would lose control of me, that I would have to go. So he wanted to give me as much as he could.
Yeah.
I think I would have ended up being a partner.
Yeah.
But we would have built it together. I would not want to leave him and go somewhere else. And that's an important lesson.
For sure.
You know?
For sure. Yeah. Like have him step away and spend more time with the family while you kind of took it over. Yeah. That's a great story.
So there was a mentor story that was merging with that, unknowing to me, that the rental thing, that came from a guy that was a senior executive at the manufacturer. George Vandruska. He was called the General. We all called him the General because he was that kind of persona. In his 50s at the time. To me, when that was like, you're really old. Now I'm 50s. But he would do push-ups every day, and like he had the bulky muscles and he had the deep voice. Everyone just loved this guy. And he took me under his wing, and a large portion of why he took me under his wing is because I early identified in my sales career, when I owned the company, that I loved renting, because his phrase always was, a rental is a sale. When you sell a product, you can only sell it once. When you rent a product, they use it once and they need it again. And so you keep reselling. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. So I built my career in that and became close to him. And he had a side division that was this rental company, and ultimately he built that so big that he sold it back to the manufacturer because he owned it separately from the manufacturer, and he made a boatload of money. He was on the board of directors of this huge manufacturer, and when the opportunity came up, this is the story. This is the mentor story of somebody that truly, will go out of their way for you. This is the definition of a mentor. The first story I gave you, that is the definition of a mentor in my mind.
Yep.
The board, I put in basically a petition to start one of these businesses in Chicago distributing their product. And there was a competitor in Chicago that was distributing the same product. So it was essentially going to be a wrestling cage match on every single deal. But I thought I was super qualified. I was one of the top reps in the world and had a fair amount of history, but apparently I rubbed some people the wrong way along the path.
Enter politics.
No, I'm pretty sure I earned whatever detailed discussion, which I'm never going to know all the details of that discussion. But what I do know is the board unanimously voted me down, said absolutely not. That guy is not getting a company. This is the company that launched me into everything else, right? So if this moment didn't happen, the rest wouldn't have happened. He stood up, and I got this from several board members after the fact who voluntarily told me, yeah, I voted you down. I didn't want you. You were a nightmare to deal with back then. He stood up. He said, I know Bucky well. I personally, he's the best choice for this out of anybody you guys could bring in here, and I will stake my personal reputation on him. I will take him under my wing. If this goes bad, this comes back on me.
And who is this?
This is George Vandruska, who was highly respected in the board. The board had unanimously already voted me down.
Yeah.
And he stood up as the one board member who hadn't voted and not only vowed for me, but laid everything out there. And they all respected him so much that they reversed their votes based on him taking full responsibility for me.
Wow.
That's a fucking mentor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah.
That changed.
You
your,
get chills and tingle a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That to me is a real mentor.
And that guy changed your whole life then.
Yeah.
Because there's so many other stories after that.
Is he still around? He's still around today?
He is, and he's still doing push-ups every freaking morning. I think he's 88 now. He lives up in northern Michigan. Yeah.
Cool.
Wow.
He looks like you, Pat. He's got the veins coming out. Yeah. I like how you're posed perfectly for the camera there.
Oh, is that right?
Like, I need something. Can you draw one on me here?
That's funny.
So you started this company, and it was called Trade Tech, right? Mm-hmm. What year was that?
99 and 2000, right in the epitome of the dot-com crash that I was describing before. And when it crashed, so I owned the business then. That's when we pivoted and we're doing rentals primarily to big companies that were actually making a profit out there, and that catapulted.
As a serial entrepreneur, I know that's not the only thing you did. So you worked at Trade Tech, and then you started investing in other things and starting other companies. Kind of give us the timeline of a couple of your companies and tell us what they were.
All seemingly by accident, but you keep going back to the core takeaway. Every time something didn't make sense, I was paying ridiculous amounts to lease warehouses for all of my
your rentals. Yeah.
So I said, why don't I buy them?
Right.
And then when I got really cheap, but it had too low of a ceiling, and I said, why don't I raise the roof? And I found a company that could plasma cut the roof and Duck Dynasty style raise the thing up and slap in a stripe. And ultimately I sold that building for about $4 million more because of that little bit. But just little things that along the way on the business side that were directly related to Trade Tech. But then right after the financial crisis, which that was a disaster for us. Marketing, you do a
were
lot
in
of
real
real
estate.
estate.
Yeah.
I wasn't in real estate other than the buildings at that time.
Okay.
It started right after that. But that was an absolute disaster. That was the worst entrepreneurial
for trade shows,
for everything.
Well, right, yeah.
But yeah, I had
more consequential than like COVID.
Oh yeah. For me then.
Got it.
That's not a fair question because I sold right before COVID.
Got it.
What back then it was multiple things that happened at once. It was the financial crisis was happening. Top line was down 40 some odd percent. Bottom line was down 68%. I had to go from about 60 employees to about 12 if you've never had to lay off.
It's one of the toughest
it's
things.
really easy to lay off C players, right? Thank God you're gone. I was dying to get rid of you. B minus starts getting a little harder. B is getting really hard. B
it's the
plus,
worst thing in the business.
B plus, these are people that bled for you.
Yeah.
You get into the A minuses and even the A's. These are family. And you talk about going home crying every night. That's by the way, when I think an entrepreneur really becomes an entrepreneur, because it's real easy if everything goes well all the time.
Right.
But so we had the great financial crisis. My two top sales reps, turns out I was a pretty shitty leader back then. They were so angry with me, and these guys were making $350,000, $400,000 a year. Not only did they quit on me, and they controlled about 60% of my revenue because I built teams around them. Not only did they quit, they formed a competing company and sued me for my non-compete. At the same time, the state of Illinois came after me and said I owed them $468,000 for charging sales tax incorrectly for several years, even though I had done exactly what my CPA firm had told me for years. All that stuff happened at once. Yeah, so it was bad.
08?
Huh?
What year? Give me.
This is 09.
09 at this
to show
point.
you again how I'm not the brightest bulb out there. All the crises happened in 08 predominantly. And I'd go to my business board groups. I'm in with Tim Green, the Vistage group. And everybody in the group was, my business is going horrible. I don't know what I'm going to do. Everything's falling apart.
Right.
And at the same time, I was having my best year ever. I mean, we were through the roof. And I'd sit there quietly at these meetings and I'm like, I don't know what's happening, but for some reason, nothing's happened to me.
Yeah.
Never thought to occur to me that everybody in the trade show world, you have to pay for your space a year in advance.
Yeah.
So, of course, they already paid for it a year ago. Yeah, so I fell off the cliff in 09. And then my partner wanted out too. I was 50-50 partners when it started that company. And he was 12 years older than me. And so he wanted out, but no banks would give me money to buy him out. And ultimately, I found one that is another mentor who really took me under his wing early and became a big part of the real estate story. He gave me $2 million. My partner was willing. It was supposed to be $4 million. He said, "I'll give you a 50% discount if you can find somebody to pay me off." And it was supposed to be a 10-year payoff. He said, "I want it now." 'Cause not being a bad person, but his wife and probably anybody practical took one look at me and everything happening and said, he's not going to make it. There's not going to be money for 10 years. So give him anything and take what you can get type of thing.
Right.
And so it was a banker that I had gotten to know who I wasn't really even doing any business with, but watched me build the company. I watched him build the bank. And he gave me $2 million with one due diligence question only. He said, Bucky, are you going to get out of this? And I said, Ken, his name is Ken Poteet, said, I have no plan B. There's no plan B. And at this time, I had kids at this point.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about motivation and passion? Hit me with the sledgehammer. I don't care that you can't see my bludgeoned face anymore. I'm still getting up. I'm still coming back. And ultimately, everything was worked out by the end of that year. It was a successful buyout. My partner and I, ex-partner and I, are still great friends to this day. That launched a new leadership style for me that I brought on a full management team and actually quickly gave them phantom stock in the company and equity. Changed my leadership style entirely, solved the problem with the state of Illinois, which is a huge pain in the ass. It's one thing, by the way, to get audited by the feds. The state of Illinois, who has no money, that was an entirely different experience, and I hated it, and I hope I never have to go through it again. But ultimately, I solved it with a PowerPoint and making these really serious people in this conference room, it wasn't even a courtroom, it was a conference room, laugh. And they let me out for $12,000 instead of $468,000.
What a
Wow.
My partner sold for half. The two sales reps that left and sued me, they never got a single client. And ultimately, after each of us spent $150,000 that neither of us had, I called there was two of them. I called the more rational one of the two and said, "Are you done paying? Because I'm done. You guys just want to solve this and call it a draw."
Right.
And we did. And so everything worked out, but that's where I lost all my hair, that year. But the worst part of all that was back to having to lay off great people.
Were you able to bring someone back though when things started to turn around?
Yes, but it wasn't a super fast turnaround.
Yeah.
It took about 18 months, and a lot of they had to get other jobs.
Yeah.
And so I lost the opportunity to do a bunch. But that did turn into the real story, because I vowed to my wife, to all the employees, to God, to anybody that would listen to me, that if I got myself out of this, I would put $1 million in a bank account and forget all about it, so that the next time that there was a problem like the financial crisis, I wouldn't have to lay off my A players. I would be able to survive and pay with, from a rainy day fund.
Right.
And ultimately, we did turn fast, and I did put that $1 million in a bank account, and I truly meant it when I said I was going to forget about it in the corner. Until
as an entrepreneur,
my local real estate agent told me that my dream house that I had bought a couple years before was worth half. So this is 2009 now, right? Or no, I'm sorry. Fast forward to 2011. This is 2011. So 2 years have gone by. Mm-hmm. The company's rebounded beautifully. Yep. All the other crap is in the rearview mirror. And I've got this bank account sitting there, and I find out my dream house that I bought in like 2007, the worst time you could possibly buy a house back before the financial crisis, was worth half what I paid for it, which pissed me off. But then the $1 million, which of course I put in Ken's bank, and I got my statement, and take a guess how much interest I made on $1 million in the bank.
Just sitting in a bank account?
For 1 year?
No, for just a month. For a month.
For a month? Yeah. It had to be less than 1%.
Yeah. It was like 0.00. It was $71. $71. And meanwhile, I know that he, as a banker, is, because they taught me that they 10x lend it out. Mm-hmm. And at the time, interest rates I think were 4.5%. I'm like, wait a minute, Ken, $10 million at 4% is a lot more than $17 or $71 or whatever it's getting. I have it framed somewhere. It's in a box somewhere. I framed it. But that pissed me off 10 times more. But what didn't make sense was my house was worth half, and I had $1 million. That I couldn't get that out of my head. And so I went in to our next Vistage meeting to your friend and mine, Tim Green. And he said, "You're the real estate." I slapped them both down on the table. I said, "You're the real estate guy. Tell me what to do." He said, long story short, he sold me a couple townhouses out in some town here in the Chicago suburb called Yorkville, which I had never heard of other than I knew they had a water park. And these were, this is now years after the financial crisis. Everyone thinks the financial crisis, everyone lost their homes and the houses all turned over like 2008 and 9. What they don't realize is the banks kept the inventory because they couldn't afford to take the losses all at once. In each quarter, they wrote them down a little bit. Well, if you look back in history, unknowingly, to me at the time, right in early 2011, just when Tim and when I got pissed off and put those sheets down, it happened to be good timing, great timing, was right when the banks were finally like, okay, we wrote these things down enough. Now we can release them and actually make a profit on them, sell them for more than we're showing them on our balance sheets. And that's what happened is Tim gave me 3 of those. Quickly, I'm trying to speed through this story because this was actually a really, really good story. I love, and I know, Jeff, that you feel the same way, that you try to do anything you can to help mankind. If you can do an entrepreneurial thing that is successful and can help mankind, that's the trifecta, right? That everybody goes for. It's quite often difficult. You have to pick one or the other, profits or help mankind. So this ultimately was a case that he sold me 3 townhouses. They were decked out models. And I had one of his agents, Neil Pickett. Do you remember him?
I remember Neil.
Yep, love Neil. I think he's got to be, in his 80s now? He's retired.
Yeah, he's retired.
So
yeah.
Neil said, I'll be your protector. I'll screen all the tenants that come in. And they did an analysis and said, I should rent these things for $1,200 a piece, or was the going rate. It was $1,200.
And you bought these for how much a piece?
$90,000 a piece. And
Okay.
$90,000. And Tim basically said they were $275,000 places before the crisis.
Wow.
Buy them for 90. Worst case scenario, you hate this. I'll sell them to another investor for $5-10 more, and you
get your
be
money
out of it.
back.
But if you
Right.
like it, let's do more.
Right.
And so I thought, if you rent something, if somebody tells you it should be $1,200, you're supposed to put $1,200 out there, and Pat shows up and says, Bucky, I'm going to give you $1,200. Great, Pat. It's been fun. You just send it once a month, and that's what we're supposed to do, right?
Right.
What happened? Because this is again 3 years, 2.5 years after the financial crisis. I would get the few people that Neil would let through his legitimate screening. He wanted 700 credit scores. Well, how many people had 700 credit scores after
the financial crisis?
So what I got instead, Pat didn't come and say, "Hey, Bucky, I love it, $1,200. Here it is." And Pat said, "Bucky, I have a credit of 720. Nobody has that kind of credit score. I'll give you 700." Pat, I didn't know this was a negotiation. I thought, I provide the house and you pay me and move in.
Yeah.
That happened like a half dozen times in a short period of time. And so I called up
Well, that
Neil.
doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make sense at all. I called up Neil. I said, "Hey, Neil, tell me about all the people that you're rejecting." I'm losing my voice here, sorry. Tell me about all the people you're rejecting. And the sentence he said to me, and I still love anytime I get a chance to talk to him that we reminisce about this story, because this sentence literally created a $100 million empire. And it was in this exact tone, but it wasn't meaning anything vindictive by it. He just said, "Oh, they all have foreclosures." Well, what I didn't tell you in the story, when everything was going to hell in 2009 for me, I almost lost my house. I mean, truly everything was, the cash machine was not spitting at me. It was demanding me put stuff in, and everything was going to hell. So I said, "Okay, interesting, Neil. Send me your 5 favorite rejects." Sent them over, and I promise the story's going to speed up here really quick. Sent me the 5 rejects. I called them up. Rewind, play, this same exact story, all 5 of them. They had mid-level management job. They lived below their means. They were a family of 4 typically. Their kids were in the local school district. They knew things were getting rough out there and were worried that they might lose their job. So everyone was getting things in the mail back then, these big postcards that were HELOCs, home equity lines of credit, and encouraging everyone because your house just goes up, 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 up. Like borrow, buy a new car, go on fancy vacations, build an addition on your house, do whatever you want because it's only going to always go up. You guys remember these things,
sure.
right? Yeah, this was the bane of America's existence here. So these guys they followed the rules. They didn't cash in those cards, but ultimately, then they did lose their job, and they had savings, but they marched into their banks with the postcard. Some version of marching in with the postcard, say, "Hey, I don't want to cash it in for a vacation or a car or something stupid. I think it might take me a while to find a new job. So this I'm going to borrow so that I can continue making my payments, and everything's going to be fine." And their version of the answer was somewhere along the lines of, "Hey, thanks a lot for telling me, first off, that you lost your job and you have no income. Two, your house that you have a $243,000 loan with us, we think is worth about $148,000. So you're underwater. You're never going to be able to recover that. So we're going to start foreclosure right now." And some version of that happened over and over everywhere. And these people were following the rules. Yeah. I was following the rules. So I'm certainly empathetic to that. And then the story always finished some version of, thank goodness my wife or my husband, this happened to be four gentlemen, my wife or my husband loves me enough that they stayed with me, and now we just don't want the kids to be affected. Right. So they have to stay in their school districts. So they're living in rat holes that are getting terrible service and management. And so that hit me right away that, oh my gosh, there's a huge market out there, huge market.
Qualified people under bad circumstances.
Unbelievable. These are your solid middle class, and even upper middle class Americans. These are your neighbors.
Credit scores are so, yeah.
We talk. We have so many conversations about this. It's stupid.
We've both
it's the dumbest thing ever.
By dumb.
You pay something off and your score goes down. It's like,
yeah.
Wait,
and it's not just like 10 points. It's like we had an issue with a credit card that we're like, long story, but it was under my name and we thought it was getting paid and it didn't get paid, and it got docked like 150 points. Yeah. So that my buying power with now my credit score being in like the sixes was like not
complete bullshit.
Yeah. And never had a late payment, right? And it's ridiculous. So that's cool that you were able to.
So I picked my three favorite and said, "You're in." I said, "But I have just a couple caveats," and this is what turned into everything. The story is almost over. I said, one, my real estate agent, Neil, said I should just do 1-year leases. I said, I don't have the time to find a new you every year, so I'm going to require at least 2 years. I'll go up to 3 so that you have the security of knowing you have the place, and I know I don't have to go find somebody else. Neil gets 1 month commission too per year on that. I said, 2, I'm supposed to charge you $1,200. They told me. Remember back to Pat only offered me $700. Mm-hmm. I said, I'm supposed to charge you $1,200. But, I'm the only guy in town that is not only dealing with foreclosure victims, I'm doing it with luxury, high-end, professionally managed. I said, I'm not going to charge you $1,200. I'm going to charge you $1,400.
Right, I have the risk.
And the first two are like, no problem. The third guy said, I would have given you more, but you said $1,400. Yeah. So I knew I was on to something. Yeah. I called that banker back up, Ken, and I said, oh my gosh, Ken, I don't have $1 million anymore, but I have $700,000 left. Here's what I've identified. How do I do this as fast as possible and ramp this up? And long story short,
what do you say? Do this as fast as possible.
Buy as many things as possible and rent them. Do exactly only to foreclosure. Immediately, my head, because it made no sense.
Only rent to foreclosure.
I will only rent to foreclosure. Right away. I had my model citizen. Yeah, I was all in, and so I quickly went back to Neil. And ultimately Shane and Seamus, and everyone was scouring the area for units for me. And the banker taught me something about as is and as completed appraisals. As is the one you get when you find it. As completed is when you have cash flow on the other end, so they can value it for a lot more. And remember, my rents were above market rate, so my cash flow was huge. Right. So they took $1 million. I used that up. That turned into $1.4 million. I used that up. That turned into $1.8 million. 14 tranches later, I was over 200 units in under what? About 2.5 years, I think.
Wow.
And all of them all of them were leased to
foreclosure, like highly vetted foreclosure.
Yeah, there's some version of that. And it was so cool because there was a moment in time, and unfortunately it didn't last long, that I could have rented out a bar and put a mic up front and invited all my tenants in, and they would have told tear-filled after tear-filled story how I helped them restart their lives, reposition, whatever.
What a cool
and it was truly that rare trifecta of making a boatload of profit, helping them solve a problem, and truly helping mankind. What I only wish, Pat, I had understood raising real capital and gone to some Blackstone-ish. You know, why does it take a trade show punk like me to see what was so clear? I wish I bought 10,000.
Right.
Because they were available everywhere.
That's what being an entrepreneur is. Right?
Yeah, I wish I had scaled it way more.
We all wish.
Did you see though that there was a finite amount of time to do this, and that there was an end to it? Or do you ever do that when you get into because you look at when Jeff and I got into business together, we maintained all this essentially like foreclosed land that banks and these hedge funds bought to maintain because the HOAs in the cities were finding these undeveloped lots, right? But we knew that like ultimately the economy was going to recover and they were going to build houses on these lots and we were going to lose the land. So there was a bit of adapting as you go, but there was also this like, okay, like this isn't going to be forever, right? So did you see that is kind of like there was a timeline that you needed to capitalize on?
I think you're giving me way too much credit. I wish I could tell you that.
Yeah.
No, I at the time I thought credit scores took 7 years to change. So I figured I had 7 years.
Yeah.
Right? But if you remember, they changed the rules in a good way.
Yeah.
It needed to happen.
Yeah.
And it ended up being, I think, only 3 or 4 years. So what happened is all my tenants, within 2 or 3 years after that, cycled correctly into their own homes again, and I started being a regular landlord. That.
So how many units did you end up with?
Just over 200, and then I sold some that I didn't like.
When did you start selling them? What year?
2017, 18.
Okay, so you sold.
I sold down to 164 core that I kept and ran a solid business all the way up until last April. Mm-hmm. I sold all 164 of them to one institutional buyer in Chicago.
And in 2019 or 2020, you sold Trade Tech?
Sold Trade Tech in 2020.
Okay, so 2020, that's right before COVID.
Talk
about this golden horseshoe that's somewhere.
So I mean, I don't want to underplay the timing. Here's another takeaway. Timing is everything.
Yeah. And
ultimately, once you truly understand that, you probably make a lot more decisions sooner rather than later, even if you think you're leaving money on the table or some form of growth on the table. When you have an opportunity, take it, because you don't know what's going to happen next. I am truly the luckiest person you've ever sat across from a business sale standpoint. I would pit my story against just about anybody out there because it's so ridiculous. We combined with the manufacturer. I had a private equity firm in the middle that gave me a boatload of capital to buy. I ended up having 6 acquisitions in 4 months, tripled the value of our company because it's all about trading at a multiple at the other end, turned into the largest transaction in our industry's history, just under $200 million. And the private equity firm that was ultimately buying us, they were supposed to close with us in like October of 2019. And they pushed and pushed and pushed. And a dreaded word in real estate or any business, retrade came up. They tried to retrade us for a huge chunk below, 24 hours before close. It was a very uncomfortable process to be in. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, the closing date that did happen was January 13th. 2020. Now remember, I'm a trade show guy. That trade shows are people. I thought I was diversified. I had small shows, I had medium shows, I had big shows.
Yeah.
But they all involve groups of people.
Yeah.
And so if you look back in history, the first U.S. confirmed COVID case was 1 week later, January 20th.
Yeah.
And within 3 months, The government had ordered our industry completely shut down.
Yeah.
Restaurants had it tough, but they still had curbside delivery. They still had 25% capacity.
You were down.
You cannot operate in any way, shape, or form. I was supposed to be on that plane that went down. All my friends were. So ironically, I never ever celebrated the sale of my company because we jumped into crisis mode with everyone else and with my board groups. But I was that close. And if that decision, just like when that mentor stood up and staked his reputation, this was another mark that if this had gone the other way, I think I would have drained all my resources trying to rebuild it. Because remember, PPP didn't really start paying out, at least in my industry, for almost 2 years. It took almost 2 years. Everyone acted like that money was just flowing in. It took a long time.
Yeah.
So it truly...
I've got a neighbor that his job was to build these displays at these trade shows, and he was crippled. I mean, he couldn't work.
Yeah.
And for a while. It wasn't just like for a year. I mean, the impacts lasted multiple years.
So try waking up every day with that pressure. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but I know there's something. I owe somebody something for this. And that's I like being a serial entrepreneur and in that mindset. I think that's a healthy...
It's a humble, there's humility there.
Well, you have to recognize that. One little change would have been night and day different.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to rewind a little bit because there were some other things while you still had trade tech, or while you still had trade tech. Pat and I both have walked a building with you on the roof, and there was a bunch of solar, and you were bitching and complaining about how you haven't got paid yet, and this was the stupidest thing ever.
From the government?
From ComEd or something.
Oh, okay.
So
had to bring that one out, didn't you?
So tell me a little, because I still remember walking that building. I'm like, what is going on here? What do you mean they didn't pay you? So
what's funny is you thought I knew what was going on.
I remember looking at what was going on out there, and you said, "Yeah, see this line goes back to ComEd.
Yeah,
but they haven't paid me for anything yet." You were, I think, one of the first in the state to start doing that.
So, again, listeners, don't give me more credit than is the actual reality. The true story is, I tried to sell trade tech 3 years prior, right before that happened. It was another private equity scenario. And
17 around?
Yeah, around 17. And it fell apart 7 weeks before close. And ironically, what I learned through that process is what ultimately I think allowed everything to happen the way it did on the other end. But what I knew is that I had a big tax bill coming in 2017 when I thought I was going to close. And I just couldn't fathom. Talk about something that doesn't make sense. Of all the things I could do, big taxes. I'll pay some, but I could have done all this other stuff with it. So I was determined to get that tax bill way down. And I had learned that renewable energy, in particular solar panels, had a huge amount of bonus depreciation and federal tax credits and state tax credits, and hooked up with a guy. It was like the Wild West back then. I had these warehouses, so I had the rooftops, and he had the solar panels, and I thought I was going to sell my company, so it was purely a tax play.
Right.
I didn't know anything about solar, but ultimately what happened was the state of Illinois decided they were going to be a national leader in solar power. And so they had all these huge credits, and all these big energy companies were coming on board saying, we'll build if you actually have these credits. I was the only moron in the entire state that actually built it first before they passed a law. but in my head, I was doing it for taxes anyway, but I didn't realize that I was putting everything at risk. So again, Jeff, I would love to tell a much prettier version.
Where's this horseshoe? I need one of those.
So ultimately, we built it, and we ended up being the first community solar, ironically helping mankind, community solar, which means if you as a homeowner wanted renewable energy, you could buy it at a 15% discount to regular energy. But you didn't have to make it on your house. I could make it on my roof. ComEd would pay me and then resell it through a third-party person to the individuals, as long as they're on the ComEd grid, which is pretty much everywhere here in town. Bottom line, I was the very first in the state, and ComEd wanted to show off to everybody how conscious of the planet they are. It's bullshit. They just wanted, to show that they were doing something. It's such a micro percentage of stuff. But we did a big media event, and we had all the press was there, all these executives from ComEd I've never heard of before and never since. But I was the first project in the state of Illinois. I'll always be the very first community solar project. Now there's thousands of them, I think, out there.
Yeah. Did you get that tax credit?
So I did. Ultimately on the other end, it did work out, but I got paid by the ComEd side and the credits. It took twice as long and got half as much as everyone was promised up front, which is why, by the way, all the smart guys didn't build.
Right.
They waited to see what the actual numbers were.
Right.
But no regrets. It was just the Wild West.
Yeah.
And ironically, you had to sign up for 15 years of responsibility for that. So once you make all the money up front, then you got to report. Jeff, you're ADHD just like me. How do you like reporting to somebody else?
I don't do it very well.
So I found a nonprofit who was able to take the whole system and just give me a nice write-off for the system. So I gave it to them for free. And that just happened. They take over all the responsibilities now. That just happened 2 months ago.
And they get a piece of the pie.
They get the whole thing.
Okay.
But it's all in the nonprofit world. So they're donating it to individuals that can't afford power.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was anticipation for selling the company that ultimately never happened. Did you make any money?
It did happen
later
3
on.
years later.
Did you make any money on that solar?
A lot. The taxes.
Yeah.
Oh, the taxes.
Last time I checked, every dollar you pay in taxes is identical to a dollar of profit.
Very true.
Yes. Any dollar I save millions with that. Yeah.
That's awesome. So you go into...
well, we had 3,700 panels on that roof alone. We had 7,500 panels.
That was an Elgin.
That was an Elgin you guys walked with me.
Yeah, like a month later, I remember the water just raining down in the front foyer.
That was in DuPage. That was when all the pipes burst. That was Snowmageddon, I think, and when the temperatures dropped to negative 35 and none of the HVACs could stay up with it and all the pipes burst. Yeah. That was fun.
Yeah. You like those stories. So you sell Trade Tech. You still got just the real estate going at this point. And then you sell the rest of the real estate, 164 units recently. A year ago.
Yeah, last April.
And what do you do after that?
Well,
you do nothing. You sit there. I know you're not sitting there doing nothing. So let's.
You identified the solar Wild West story that I had no knowledge of whatsoever, other than save taxes. I had the same problem when I actually sold the company in 2020 because it was for a lot more. I had a much bigger tax problem than I thought. So one of the things that I learned in trying to find more, legitimate, legal tax offsets, mobile home parks turned into being a big one, and we bought originally 2 parks that had about 180 homes on them for tax purposes. But then it turns out that I found a great operator, learned a bunch about the business, and loved the business.
And what state was this in?
It is in Zanesville, Ohio, right outside of Columbus.
Okay.
But then, ironically, the private equity partner, the good guy on my side, not the one we sold to, he and I became super close friends. And he liked the asset class as well. So he and I decided to be partners, and we bought 4 more parks right in Zanesville as well. They're little mom and pop parks. But then it made no sense to me that all these little parks were there, and they all have their own managers and their own groundskeepers. And I said, why don't we just buy these things and put them into a pod and change them all to one brand, one manager? And the operators, they were institutional level, so they knew how to run financials the way that bankers and investors want to buy, not ma and pa. And so we ended up 448 units, six parks. And we're in contract right this second. Knock on wood, I did not say that it was successful yet, because the deal gods will fall on me here. But that should be transacted by September.
Wow, that's awesome.
And
and doubled our money. And that was fantastic. A lot of work in between. We did have one tornado go through. We had interesting sewage issues. We had, I want to be really careful. And Jeff, you and I have talked about this offline before. When people talk about real estate, they think it's so easy. And when they hear somebody like me say a dumb thing,
income.
I just shot myself in the foot. I said we doubled our money. We made $12.5 million. But there's so many stories behind it, and all these dumb TV shows that make every average person out there think that every single flip has $100,000 check that's in the middle of it. They don't talk about the foundation cracks. They don't talk about the lawsuits. They don't talk about the neighbors and that make your life hell and take you to city council.
The permits.
The permits. Oh my gosh, Pat, we could go on and
Permits
on.
are like taxes. We don't need either of them.
Real estate is everything. I don't care what you're doing, what work or asset class. Nothing is as easy as the people on a podcast like this are making it sound like. Yeah. There is serious, dirty, heavy lifting going on, and no matter what, and backstories that if people are willing to be honest with you.
Yeah, I remember buying a group of homes or a package of homes, and one of them I've never been to, and I get a letter in the mail that says, "Hey, by the way, you need to fill in the basement." I'm like, what do I need to fill the basement for? And
that sounds extreme.
Yeah, it sounds a little extreme. Why didn't he fill in the basement? They said it's in a flood zone. I'm like, no one told me it was in a flood zone. I don't have insurance for a flood zone. Nothing. What do you mean? I said, yep, that's in a flood zone. If you're going to pull a permit to do anything in the house, you got to fill in the basement. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I lost all that square footage. I lost, everything. Had to move all the utilities upstairs. I mean, just to move the furnace and water heater upstairs is an extra $15,000. Like you're sitting there. And another house in that package that I bought was on well and septic. Well, it was the only house in well and septic in the entire neighborhood. There was a lien on the house to hook it up to city sewer. So I have to dig up the street. I've got to pay for that. So it's not.
See, now this is real talk.
This is an $80,000 cost. Like, oh my gosh. So people don't talk about the disasters. I mean, yes, have I won? Yes, I have. But the wins are greater than the losses, but the losses hurt.
Well, see, it's high risk, high reward, and that's where, like, again, just the mentality of an entrepreneur is just different than, and it's not wrong if somebody doesn't have an entrepreneurial mindset, right? That's not like a wrong thing, but it is a different type of mentality for sure.
Just keep going,
and you're for sure you're gonna deal with shit. And while people hear these glamorous success stories, to hear all the stuff that happened in the middle or between it is not everybody can handle that type of adversity.
Yeah, that's why I say people need bigger problems. You see people complaining their flight gets canceled or something happens, like, oh, this guy cut me off. It's like, man, you need bigger problems.
Were you around in the middle of all this when I by accident bought that building on a flight from LA?
You
No.
bought a building by accident? That's when you made it, though.
My wife forbid me to be on this auction site called 10X after this happened. It was one of these. It was like eBay.
With Grant Cardone?
I don't know if you ever got hooked on eBay for anything. I started buying video games, and all of a sudden our entire garage. I was like, you can never do eBay again. And so now 10X was an adult version of that, but it was binding contracts. I was boarding a flight in LA, and it was this really cool looking 25,000 square foot building right at the end of Estes Avenue on the edge of O'Hare. You could see the runways in the background. Mm-hmm. And it was priced, I don't know, it was $1.5 million or something. And it set a minimum reserve of $950,000 or something. And it looked good enough, but I didn't open up any of the pictures. I put a bid in at like $450,000, which I said they're not going to even accept it, But I shut off my phone then, and they didn't have internet on that flight.
You landed,
and so I land and turn on the phone, and the thing is lighting up and texts and phone calls and
congratulations.
Voicemail. Yeah, the owner decided to drop the thing. What I didn't realize, so sometimes when something doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense for a reason. The reason it was so cheap and went so cheap, it turns out it was a fully frozen building.
Oh,
for frozen food.
We talk about
refrigeration.
Yeah, not only that, it turns out that there are two different kinds of freezing. One is ammonia and kills people, and one is the modern version.
You bought the ammonia.
This was the one that kills people. And not only that, it turns out the previous tenant, the reason that the building had been vacant so long, they made picante sauce, and it had what's the botulism? Like people were dying from the product that got it in that building, and now it's mine. So we clean up the whole thing. So I own it. I had to go home and with my head between my legs and look at Heidi like I did something bad. Like, I'm so sorry. I don't know how we're gonna get out of this.
So what was the purpose for that building?
Investment.
No, not for you. For what is?
What were you going to buy the building for? What were you gonna do with it?
What were the people there before were utilizing it to make what?
Picante sauce.
Right, but they didn't realize that there was something that
it's bacteria. Somehow they did not keep a clean, sterile
environment
food quality.
Got it.
Yeah. But that was the source, right?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to invest in buildings and flip those.
Right.
And that's what I was going to do with this. So I still did that. I had to change all the lighting, change everything out, but the ammonia system was there. I found some rare ammonia guy that wasn't afraid of dying, I guess, to fix it. And ultimately, before we sold it, I got this weird call from a broker that nobody had ever heard of. And they made a really strong offer to lease it, because that ultimately is what I wanted to do, is build a portfolio and lease them out. I never really ended up doing it. I sold them all. But it turned out right when COVID was taking off and when everyone was freaking out, when McCormick Place, my trade show hall, if you remember, was turned into a 600-bed temporary hospital.
Yeah.
They literally, whether you know it or not, were setting up that O'Hare was going to have 100,000 bodies tucked in corners, and they were the city or the county wanted to lease every single freezer building in the area. They wanted to put bodies. in my eBay 10X.
Do they pay well?
Building. No, ultimately I said,
if you're Medicaid.
Now that I know what you're really going to do here, you're paying the full price of the building, because we're going to have to tear it down on the other end and start over.
Right.
They didn't, and thank goodness that was unfounded. And eventually we ended up selling for twice, 2.5 times what we put into it.
Again, where's this horseshoe?
To a company. Well, it took 3.5 years. And Elk Grove Village is not a fun taxing entity out there. But it was a salmon company. So when you eat salmon here in Chicago, you might want to check if it came from Estes Avenue. Maybe you shouldn't eat it.
Disclaimer there.
And then we bid on another one. That was about 2018. So all this stuff was happening at the same time. And again, I was pulled off 10X after this. It was on 10X. And this is the one that Seamus might have told you about, Jeff, out in Gardner, Broadview, right on Highway 290. If you guys know 290, I guess I shouldn't do, because this podcast could be anywhere. So you're like, what's 290? It's a huge highway in Chicago, main artery going downtown. This property was basically 8.5 acres that literally touched the highway.
He called me a couple times on this property.
Okay. Yeah. So we've had a myriad of problems with this, but it was 8.5 acres. It had a 180,000 square foot building from 1960 on it. That was a printing plant, which means it was an environmental disaster below it. But my intent was to cut the roof with my Duck Dynasty buddies raise that. And at that point, I had beautiful plans. This would have been so cool if it had worked out. We were going to plasma cut the whole 180,000 square feet. And because this building was literally touching 290, which is where about 250 to 275,000 cars a day are going by, and they're always in gridlock, we're going to put massive American flags on it. And I had a friend in the trade show business that did the original what was the original Pawn Stars? Thank you. Pawn Stars. So we called them. Who doesn't like big construction stuff? So we called them, pitched the idea, and these Duck Dynasty guys were so fun. I shouldn't keep calling them that. They can move all the heavy stuff. They're a technology in South Florida that has been around since the 70s, and they basically pneumatic jack up every single I-beam, plasma cut the roof, and lift everything 1 inch at a time. Cost one third normal construction and 1/4 the amount of time. But it was going to be so massive that we were going to make a series out of this on, like, I don't know, Discovery Channel or something like that. They were going to sell it to, and this was going to play out in front of Chicagoland. I was so excited. Until you had a floodplain story. I got a floodplain story, Jeff.
Yes, I know.
Guess what? Turns out I'm in a floodplain. Turns out I should have asked that question before. It wasn't so obvious the way that the title work that was in the 1920s worked.
Yeah.
But bottom line, what floodplain says is if you improve the value of what's on it by more than 50%, you are no longer grandfathered. You have to follow I would have not had to raise the roof. I would have had to raise the floor 8 feet is what it worked out.
Wow.
So instead, we ground up the building, literally ground up the building.
Yeah, the photos and videos of that were still really cool.
They are. It was fun to grind it up, but I didn't get my show.
What do you say? We say grind it. What does that mean?
We demolished it. We had to
Demoed
get
it?
all the asbestos out. I had to pay hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars for that I didn't have at the time. But literally, they take chunks of it, and it's a machine that they knock blocks off, and the blocks go through the machine, and the machine grinds it up into gravel.
Yeah. So
And
those
before-
machines that you see on like social media where you just watch people throwing them in and it just gnarls
Yes.
everything.
Before we
Okay.
get too far, I do have a story I want to talk about, a property I bought online, but you just said something that I think resonates with entrepreneurs. You just said, hey, I had to pay hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars for
That I
something
didn't
I
have.
didn't have at the time.
I still haven't sold this.
Right.
Right now.
Right.
It's,
No.
The rock piles are there, and the city's threatening to fine me $800 a day.
I know where you're going with this
So,
though.
but my motto is figure it out.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you let's give a short explanation to the listeners of people like how does Jeff or how does Pat or how does Ken do this? And they didn't have money, so what'd they do? They just dug
Well,
up.
also listeners might
box
have just heard that that you've sold things for millions of dollars at
Yeah.
this point. So
I've also spent millions of dollars.
Right. So that's the thing where people might not be connecting the dots. But like, well, he can't afford a
Thanks for connecting that.
Yeah.
Yes, I have lost. Let me clarify for the whole audience. I have lost millions and millions of dollars.
And so when you said you didn't have money at the time, obviously,
borrowed.
Yeah, we borrowed. Right. So
borrowed.
that's something
Which is
that-
even worse.
Right.
Right.
Oh, and a lot of listeners don't understand entrepreneurship, the risk that we take to
High
get
risk,
where
high
we're
reward,
at.
yeah.
Very high risk for high reward. Why do you make all this money? It's like, well, I took the risk to go this far to do this. So
Yeah.
I think that's something that's important. I wanted to touch on really quick on hey, I didn't have this money. What do you mean? I used to make millions and millions of dollars.
Scared money don't make money.
Yeah. So you borrowed the money. You had help. You get your mentor to help you. So a funny story that not really funny. I think a unique.
Is this a house or?
This is a house. I was I got a phone call. It was Christmas Eve one day, and they said, "Hey, this house burned down."
Oh.
And obviously we do fire restoration, and you've had a fire in your house.
Yes, I
So
am.
you know what that's like. I don't want to go into details. So I don't want to give away, who and where, and because there is some weird things to this story. But the house burned down. So we go in there, we do the demo, we do the fire mitigation. They didn't have enough insurance to fix the house up. He was already in foreclosure. The couple was already in foreclosure. And I said, hey, your insurance isn't going to give you the money. Your mortgage, you're about to be foreclosed. Obviously, we did the mitigation. We're owed this money. The insurance is going to pay us for the mitigation, but they're not going to pay for rebuild. You don't have enough money for code upgrades, things like that. I said, whatever you owe on your mortgage, I'll buy the house from you. Well, the house was torn to nothing. It needed, a couple $100,000 of repair work. And he said, I owe 163. And I'm like, okay, that's a little bit more than, I think it's that I want to pay because I got to put, some money into it. So he ended up not selling to me. He ended up going to foreclosure. And at the time, the guy had, cancer as well. So had the fire, had cancer, a lot of things going on in life. I see it online, and I bought it online for $83,000. And I was bidding against somebody. The last 3 minutes, we were going back and forth. So I buy it for $83,000. Now, what I did not know was a bank sent some handy Andy in there and did some of because they had no pictures online. It's like you buy the house sight unseen.
Yeah.
I knew it was in there. We did the demo. I knew what had to be done to repair. So I knew I had the estimate to put it back together.
Yeah.
I knew I was the only person that had
inside
that.
baseball,
Yeah.
right?
So I'm like, okay, I had inside data to do this.
You
So I
thought.
I didn't know they had some handy Andy go in there and the electric wasn't up to code. The plumbing wasn't up to code. No, it was the worst thing ever. So we had to demo it again. So we demoed again, obviously lead pipes, and we had to redo everything.
But you still saw that there was profit there, even after
There was still profit there.
But a lot more work.
A lot
and
more
a
work
lot more
and a lot
expense.
less profit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it was something I probably should have made 120 grand on, and I made probably 65.
And took a lot longer.
And it took a significant more time.
Yeah.
And money is, money costs money. So when you have
Money's
money tied up,
expensive.
money's expensive. When you have money tied up, you can't make more money. So this house, I sell it. I think 2 weeks after I sold it, I saw something online, and I had a police detective send me a message. Said, "Hey, did you sell that house on so and so?"
I know the story.
And I said, "Yeah, haha. That was probably the house I sold in the article."
It was.
It was the house I sold in the article. The guy bought it from me, killed his wife in the house 2 weeks later. My banker, I have a buddy who's a CEO of a bank, and he helps me with everything. And I call him. I said, "Hey, this house, blah, 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 blah." He goes, "Jeff, there are 3 bad things that happened to that house. You seriously want this house
You
back?"
wanted it again?
I was going to buy it back. And
Sell
then
it
resell
again.
it because I
Did
knew
you?
I almost did it. I almost did it, and I said, "You know what? I got lucky. I got lucky twice. I'm done with that house." So I ended up not doing it. But that was kind of a really unique story in the real estate market. Like, you see all these things that happen, so you know what it's like to go with all these stories. That was a unique.
I don't know if you remember the Broadview story, the rock piles, that there was a strip club involved. Did you
No,
remember
I didn't know that
part?
one. No.
Yeah, and the mafia is involved, and oh yeah,
Oh, no
yeah.
kidding.
There was a building on the front. I own like a a section of the front, and then the big land behind it. Next to the section in the front was a building that turns out the city was in a lawsuit with a group that wanted to open a strip club there for 11 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So, like, how many things could go wrong with
And you
that?
tore it down.
I tore down the big building.
Okay.
The strip club to be, which never is going to happen because ultimately the city won the lawsuit, but it's right in front of me. It's right there.
Oh boy.
What is it? What is it?
Abandoned.
It's just abandoned.
Yeah.
Okay.
What it is a lot of graffiti right now.
So what are you going to do with those rock piles?
Well, the city would like me to flatten them out. I would like to sell to something. I mean, we have pivoted. Talk about entrepreneur, trying. So I've been going since late 2018 on this.
We talked about truck parking. I know you, because
Yeah.
Pat and I used to own some
Truck parking makes sense, but the basis has gotten so high. We were doing EV infrastructure, truck parking, like a fleet of FedEx trucks or Amazon trucks.
That's what they call me. I was like,
Yeah.
"Hey, I know you had this truck parking
Yeah.
park with Pat. Like, what? How should we do it?" And that was one. of the
Thought we were there. That fell apart. We thought we were going to do a data center. That was going well until about a half acre less than ideally I needed. So that disappeared. We had a truck terminal going. I don't know what it's
I
going
don't know.
to
After
be.
this podcast, you and I will talk on that. We got some.
I don't know what it's going to be, but
I'm going to business with you on this. We're doing it.
I am not going to let this thing go to the end of 2026 without selling.
I'm going in on it with you. I got some ideas. So you end up selling all these properties, and obviously we talked about this. Let's talk about this heavy equipment thing.
Another tax conversation. It keeps coming back to tax.
Well, that's a lot of business owners don't understand that until they do sell, and they're like, "Holy shit, I got to pay all these
Yeah,
taxes."
but this one, I got myself into trouble.
Yeah.
Not with the taxing authorities. I got to make sure I tell the short story right. When I sold all the properties, I was investing pretty big into Florida, Naples area. We had a beach house to rent. And 4 other homes that we had.
We need to talk about that little business idea down there.
Well, that's a different business.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that after.
That's after what happened to that. But anyway, all these homes, the 4 that we tore down and built new ones in the beach house, they were all supposed to be paid for in cash by. I thought I had sold the whole real estate portfolio. Does this sound familiar? When the train tech? Do I learn? Apparently not. I thought I had sold it in 2023, And I did the cardinal sin that real estate investors, smart ones, will tell you never to do. Don't bet on the come. Wait until the cash is in your hands and then make the transaction. No, I thought I would just make the transactions. Everything would work out fine. It didn't. So everything was financed, 100%. Not a little bit, 100%. And just to put things in perspective, it was 16, 18 million. And it was all variable loans. And then that little interest thing happened. You guys remember that?
Oh, yeah.
I thought money was supposed to be free forever.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And it hasn't come down.
So my interest rates tripled, literally. And the juice in that was enough to make you throw up in your mouth on a monthly basis. And so bottom line, the reason I'm telling you that backstory is when I sold all the properties, I had something called a CMBS loan, commercial mortgage-backed security loan, on that for about 12 million. I was in deep about 18 million more on all these others. And I had a super low basis on all of these homes, all of the townhouses, because I did something called cost segregation. Another episode, another story, but greatest thing in real estate. It's awesome. 100% bonus depreciation is back out there. Cost segregation is the way to go if you're in real estate. But when you do it, and I did it when I sold Trade Tech to get my taxes down, I, as an entrepreneur, kept hearing the word avoid taxes. My CPA kept saying the word is defer, Bucky, not avoid. And so when I sold these houses last year, the whole portfolio, he called me up and said, "So Bucky, I've been telling you for 5 years. So it's not avoid, it's defer. So today we're going to learn a new word. It's called recapture. And recapture is all the benefit you got on the other end you owe right now." So basically, I had loans that were totaling about, call it 28 million. And I owed taxes because of the recapture of about 7.5, which that doesn't compute. That means there's nothing left, right, at the other end. And not only that, I owed more taxes than I had. Maybe it was a couple million over. I would have had to start selling investments at penalties just to pay the taxes that were due. And there's something called a 1031 in real estate, another way to flip it into next properties. But the problem with that is you have to have liquidity to buy the next property. And in case you weren't listening to my math, my liquidity was gone. So, and I didn't want, again, it made no sense that I'd have to pay all this tax. So I was trying to come up with something to defer to the next level. And it took about 6 months. And this is current events. This just happened, between last April and last November. My wife would tell you, literally, I would sleep 1 or 2 hours a night. And then I'd get on the internet and comb all the dark corners of Facebook and LinkedIn. And for all I know, I was on the dark web. I don't know. But anybody that had any semblance of tax strategy, tax specialty, and was legal. I wasn't willing to go to jail over this,
right.
But I had to solve the problem. The classic entrepreneur, like when you lock on something, like the ADHD world, it's called hyperfocus. There was nothing going on in my world other than figuring this out. And ultimately, through a friend of a friend of a friend, networking going back, this guy I never would have thought. I talked to hundreds of nefarious characters across America. Most of them belong in jail or have such dumb ideas that I don't know how their clients go with any of them. But a friend of a friend of a friend connected me with an opportunity with heavy equipment. And when I say heavy equipment, this is aerial equipment. You see the scissor lifts, you see basically skyjacks, which are the 4 big tires and a boom that goes out 50 to 100 feet. And at the end of that boom is either blades or a cage. Yeah. And that is, most people don't realize, those are the most rented pieces of construction equipment anywhere for anything. You need them to build roads, buildings, houses, tunnels, you name it. And hooked me up with a company, a $4 billion company, the 4th largest equipment rental manufacturer in America. Behind United is number 1. United Rentals, they're blue and gray. Yeah. Sunbelt is green and gray. They're number 2. Herc is black and gold like the Hawkeyes. They're number 3. Equipment Share is number 4. and they are growing their company. They're about $4 billion now, 300 lots across America, about 400,000 pieces of equipment. They buy half of it on their own balance sheet. They take the other half, and they find guys like me that have a tax issue. And I buy the equipment through them. They sign 6-year leases with me because they're all rented out, and they handle everything. They deliver it, they pick it up, they insure it, they maintain it. And I've got technology on my phone I can open up right now and show you the map of America that each and every one of my 406 machines. I can show you where it's at. I can show you its current battery life, when it last moved, how many hours it's been used, all the work orders in history. Fantastic technology, and allows me to interact with it that way. So I'm an active LLC. But two things just happened in case you didn't pick it up. Equipment has a 5-year lifespan.
Okay.
So from tax purposes, IRS tax purposes, bonus depreciation that works for real estate also works for equipment. And anything under 20-year property is now 100% bonus depreciation. So if you have a $28 million recapture problem, which I did, you buy $28 million of equipment and your tax bill is zero. Legally, not perfectly legally, because you're buying it and you're personally guaranteeing it. So, but because it's such a good asset, with the banks as far as collateral, they've got banks that they connect you with that it's a 10-to-1 leverage. So instead of buying $28 million of equipment, I buy $2.8 million and finance 90%. But the equipment leases are more than enough to pay all of that debt and still make about an 18% profit on the 10% you put down. And then they have a guaranteed buyout on the other end as well. It fills in, it checked all the boxes. It was amazing. But I literally didn't find that until late September. I was ready to throw in the towel on
was
this
it
one.
what was, I guess, for me listening to it, I'm like, oh, that's cool. I wouldn't have thought of that. But I have to imagine that this wasn't like some epiphany, that some loophole that they figured out.
Well, it's not a loophole, because ultimately I am responsible for that equipment. If this company goes bankrupt, that equipment's mine. The bank is going to want their 90% that they loaned me.
So what took so, why wasn't there anybody advising you to do that? What was so difficult?
Well, I asked my CPA that question.
Yeah.
I did. Why did I have to suffer for the last 6 months?
Yeah.
Because obviously I took it to my legal team and
make sure it's all buttoned up and everything.
And they're like, oh my gosh, as long as you understand you have a real liability here. And I got really comfortable with the liability because I contacted a company called Ritchie Brothers, which they are the largest auction house. Well, most people may not know that they have a software division called Rouse,
which is bigger than their...
Yes. And so Rouse is a shitload of data that every transaction that happens anywhere in the world. So I hired them to do a 6-year valuation matrix for me, and they have something called orderly wind down, fair market value, forced liquidation, and they laid out a 6-year grid for me, so that I could see at any point if things truly went to hell. I was never going to be more than $8 million out. Remember what I told you my tax bill was at the beginning?
7.
Yeah. So how hard was it for me to get comfortable with that idea?
Yeah.
And so then ultimately I played, and I ended up being able to play a interest rate arbitrage, because interest rates dropped a point last year and they're about to drop another point. And I got the banks that normally did fixed loans for these equipment, I got them to do a variable rate with a ceiling and a floor, and believing that it would come down more than it would go up. And basically for every quarter point right now, I get another $50,000 in tax-free income. By the way, all the income on in this scenario, because you're an active LLC, you're interacting with the equipment, all that interest from the loan offsets all the income. So the income is not taxable. So it worked out great. Now, understand that word defer hits again at 6 years. When they buy back the equipment and I have to sell it to them as part of the contract I have to either buy more equipment or real estate or something else. So the real estate pros, they have a T-shirt. Have you ever seen the T-shirt?
What does it say?
Defer, 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 die. The first time I only did like 3 defers, and my wife is like, could you add 2 or 3 more defers on there, please?
We're dying too quick.
You're dying too soon.
So the moral of the story is entrepreneurship is not all rainbows and sunshine. and you should build the bike. This all happened.
Always build the bike.
Always build the bike.
Always build
This
the bike.
all happened because your boss didn't want to build the bike.
Yeah.
So
Or didn't seem to understand it was
sitting here
sunny out.
today because the family wanted to ride their 4 bikes.
Yeah, well, it's finding a solution
Yeah.
to everyday problems.
Yeah, that's what people always ask me, like, how do you think of this? I'm like, I don't know. I just want to find a solution. Like that's it. That's all I think about is finding a solution to a problem.
Yeah.
And when customers call, they're calling with a problem. Just find a solution. Just become valuable. Find a solution. So, wrap this up. I think there was a couple projects that you and I both have worked on. And you're into biking a lot more than I am. I bike very little. One of the things I want to talk about is Cal's Angels. And before we got on, you were talking about you're riding 6,000 miles a year. Let's talk about
That was only a couple years.
Yeah, let's talk about why you're riding 6,000 miles a year.
Cal's is a regional pediatric cancer charity that I grew up with pediatric cancer. My father was a clinical pharmacologist, and he specialized on the kids side. So I literally grew up with it around me all the time, and so I was already very passionate and got involved with Cal's early on, and was the chairman through 2018, 19. They're doing amazing things in the area. They've probably given out well over 1,000 wishes at this point. They have done a substantial amount of clinical research projects, cutting edge clinical research projects that are actually moving the needle, and a ton of awareness. The way that breast cancer phenomenally was made known and awareness out there. We wanted gold, which is the pediatric color, to be known as well. So and Cal's is doing all this better than anyone else, frankly, in the area. And so they had a cycling event. And I was fat. I'm fat again now. I need to go back into the cycling, but it seemed like a great thing to get in shape, and it was an extreme cycling thing that I did for of the years. They've dialed them back a little bit now because they determined it. I think it was outright abusive to the human body of what we were doing. But essentially, you ride about 100 miles a day for typically 10 days. 120 miles a day. And that the latest one 2 years ago that you're referring to, Jeff, which was absolute insanity. We went from Washington, D.C. back to Chicago in 10 days. And so that's, I think, about 1,079 miles. But there's a little thing in between Washington and Chicago called the Allegheny Mountains, and 54,000 feet of climb. And you just picture if anybody that's ridden a bike out there, put it in the smallest gear and spin your pedals literally to this one revolution per every 3 seconds, because you're going 3 miles an hour. You can walk faster than we were riding, and you have to ride like that for hours at a time.
Pretty early on in the process, too.
Yeah.
So-
Oh, yeah. The Allegheny Mountain,
you
I
were
think it was
burnt
day 2 or 3. Or it's like, what?
You were fresh,
What have
but you
we
were
done?
burnt out.
Yeah. But the nice thing about that is we earned a substantial amount of money, and that ride was strictly for research, which several of our teammates had lost a child personally. So the intense emotion and cause for what we were doing. We're all in uniform everywhere and riding across America, and the vans were all wrapped in graphics. So the awareness side was massive. We were on media all over. We'd have, ambulances and first responders and dump trucks and garbage trucks lead us out of these small towns, and cool as shit. But the biggest thing was, we've raised as a group on that cycling team, which was only about 20 of us. I think about $2.5 million in 4 years.
One thing I noticed about charities and giving back. So I have a 501c3 raise money for a charity who raise money for local families affected by cancer. And then I sit on a couple special needs boards and then Little Friends. There are a lot of entrepreneurs that I've found involved in all of these charities and community events of giving back.
And I wish there was even more.
I wish there was more. I do.
I wish there was even more.
I do try to get
so many people, Jeff, and you're clearly around them. So many people have amazing hearts that create these causes, but they don't think like an entrepreneur. And you have to run the nonprofits exactly as you're running a startup business.
Right.
Yeah, and the thing I notice is a lot of entrepreneurs are involved, and it's, I think, because they want to solve a problem, they want to help, and I think that's kind of the true definition of us as entrepreneurs. We're just trying to solve a problem, something that didn't make sense, and to help out in the community.
Yeah.
And I think
it's a lot of paying it forward, right? And that's goes back to what you guys are talking about with mentors, right? I said mutually beneficial, but it doesn't mean benefiting somebody doesn't mean necessarily financially. There's a internal reward that, like, somebody did something for you and you want to give back, right? So I think it kind of all coincides for sure.
Yeah.
So we'll end on this. If you could give one piece of advice to an entrepreneur that's, on a journey at my stage or sooner, what's something you would tell them if you could bring them under your wing and say, hey?
Well, other than the obvious that I've been hammering this whole time, if it doesn't make sense, if you've identified something that makes so much sense to you to solve, truly makes sense to you, never let up. You may pivot. Don't mistake not pivoting for surrendering, but never let up. Never let up. And if you're truly that passionate about it, and if you start to sense yourself letting up, sell it fast. Get whatever you can, because seriously, you've now turned a corner and you're headed towards the end.
Yeah, never give up. I think that's a great way to end this. So thanks for coming out, and I appreciate time.
It's been fun, guys.
We could go hours.
I think we could. Did we go 3 hours? We probably went for 2 hours.
A couple hours, yeah.